Hello again, everyone. Allow me to welcome His Excellency Prime Minister Saad Hariri for a dialogue on Lebanon in a turbulent region. Prime Minister Hariri, we are very happy and honored to have you with us today in a Q&A format, which I'm hoping will generate a lot of discussions.
I want to thank you all for being here, and I hope we'll have a discussion, a frank discussion about Lebanon, about what's happening around us. I'll try to be as frank as I can be. مش حبق البحصة اليوم. So if anybody is waiting.
بس إذا بدك ما يخبرنا.
هشرب كتير مي عشان ما بقى. Thank you all, and I look forward to having a good debate. Okay. Thank you so much.
The conversation will be in English, so anybody who needs translation, there are translation kits in the back. I'm going to begin with a question that I think is on everyone's mind. You recently rescinded on your resignation after a politically turbulent month, to say the least. And in the short government statement last week, you emphasized the Ta'if agreement, particularly, I guess, the power sharing aspect of it, but also the policy of dissociation from regional conflicts. The question is, how do you plan on monitoring this dissociation and making sure it gets implemented? How will the government go about this?
Well, it's obvious for me that we look for the Lebanon's interest. And I think any political party that wants Lebanon's stability and Lebanon's interest vis-a-vis the Arab world, vis-a-vis our economic interest between us and the Gulf states and the Arab world, is bound to follow the disassociation policy. The good thing is that it's for the first time we have a government decision on the disassociation with all political parties agreeing to this policy. And I believe that everybody realizes the danger we are in, whether it's economical or political or stability-wise. And I believe all the political parties are willing to act on this policy positively. I understand the difficulties that some Gulf states have towards accepting Lebanon's political maybe contradictions that we live in. But this is a fact that we have to have in Lebanon. And I believe pushing all the political parties towards a disassociation policy is extremely important. And if people or political parties do not follow this policy, they will be the ones to blame. In the end, Lebanon or the people of Lebanon should not pay the price of certain ventures that some political parties would do. And I don't only mean, certain political parties like Hezbollah, but also, we have to, as political parties, maybe as future movement, also abide by this association policy, because we have some differences politically between us and Hezbollah regionally. We will not agree on their policy vis-a-vis what they want in the region, and they will not agree with what we want in the region. So the best thing is to put aside, these differences and make sure that we serve all of us the interest of Lebanon.
Are there concrete steps you're expecting from Hezbollah, let's say?
I think from the day we started this policy, you can see that the rhetoric in the media has calmed down a little bit. I think we will follow through on these issues. I think any break of this association policy, we will follow it diligently. I will follow it diligently. I think there was some issues that happened in the south of Lebanon. We had a statement, and it's very clear myself or the president took steps on this issue. where we had the Iraqi militia, on the borders. So we are taking steps, and we're making sure that this policy is going to be followed through to the end.
Let's move on to the next question then. You just came back from the International Support Group for Lebanon meeting that was hosted by President Emmanuel Macron. There are also a series of upcoming conferences intended to support Lebanon, both in there's Paris 4, there's the Rome Conference in support of the Lebanese army, and then in April 2018 there's the Brussels Conference for refugees. Can you outline a little bit Lebanon's expectations from these conferences, and also what are its responsibilities towards the international community?
The goal we have in these conferences are the following. We want to make sure that we have political stability. You have to understand that Lebanon is passing through a very hard time in every single sector, whether it's economics, whether it's environment, whether it's stability, whether it's security, whether it's any sector you think of, we have a problem in it. So the best way to move forward is, first of all, we need to have political support for the stability of Lebanon, and I think we did that in the ISG in Paris. And the roadmap that we drew for these conferences is, one is to support Lebanon for the political stability that we have today. The second one is to ensure that security-wise we have all the means to fight any instability or security breaches that we have in the country. That's why we want a Rome II conference where we have commitments from different countries to help the LAF and the ISF and all security services. And also, if you want economical stability, you have to have the first two to start with. And I think we started with the political, we will get to the Rome II, and then we will go to the Paris conference for economical help or economical support for Lebanon. And this is a project that we have been working for the past 6 to 8 months in the government. We will finalize it hopefully very soon. And this will give the confidence for people to come to Lebanon to invest. And if we have the support of most of the countries that they will come to the Paris conference, and I think we will have a story to tell. We have 1.5 million, Syrian refugees, and this is a fact. And those refugees need to go back to Syria. This is a fact too. But in order for them, by the time they leave, we have to deal with their presence here. And we are doing a public service for the whole international community. And I believe that the international community has a responsibility towards Lebanon in helping Lebanon get either grants or soft loans or concessional loans in order to move our economy. Because no matter how much we pay today money to the refugees, it's not going to create jobs. What we need is to create jobs for the Lebanese and for the Syrians. And in order to create jobs for the Lebanese and the Syrians, we have to start by investing in big infrastructure jobs, whether it's electricity, whether it's roads, whether it's dams, whether all these infrastructure projects. And we have almost finalized the whole project, and it's going to be between 12 and 16 billion over 6-7 years. This is what we want to see the international community commit. But you have to understand that 30% to 40% of this project is also done by the private sector. So we're not only looking for grants or concession loans, but also we're looking for big private companies to come from the international community, also invest in the power generation in different sectors, in toll roads, in the airport that we have in the Rafiq Hariri airport, which I remember when my father built it. At the time, everybody was criticizing him, and they all attacked him because he was building an airport for 6 million people, and yet today we have 10 million people who travel through this airport, and we need to expand this airport to 16 million travelers. And we shouldn't, as a government, we shouldn't be paying an expansion for this airport. We should do it on a PPP basis. We should, let the private sector strive in this country, and we should let all the private businesses that we have. And we have a lot of businessmen, Lebanese businessmen, they're all over the place. So we want them to come back to Lebanon, because we believe that our story is a good story, and I believe that Lebanon will come out of this crisis in a very positive way.
So it's basically the economic vision that you're putting together, but that despite the turbulence in the region, you're hoping that...
Look, any economic vision has to have stability, political stability, and we have to have stability where our security is at the forefront in our agenda. So the whole process of these conferences is to get the political support for political stability. Then we go to Rome 2. We have the commitment of countries to help the LAF and the ISF, because we want to implement 1701 also. But in order for us to implement 1701, we have to have an LAF that is able to move fast, to do its job fast. And unfortunately, security in the past wasn't a real investment that we believed in Lebanon. Just to give you for instance, in 2005, after the assassination of my father, the ISF, which is the police force in Lebanon, the numbers of the ISF was 9,800 for the whole of Lebanon. Today we're at 28,000. The LAF, with all the problems we have in Lebanon, border control and 1701 and all of that, and you remember all the Fatah al-Islam problem we had, and all these terrorist attack we had. We only had 40,000 troops. Today we have about 82,000 troops. So we increased our security forces, especially in the past 4 or 5 years, in order to face the challenges that we face. But I don't think it's about numbers. In the end, it's about the right training, the right equipment, and the right resources that we should. My belief is we should focus on the security forces, where we invest in the kind of training that is good for Lebanon, the kind of training that is good for the acting against these terrorist attacks, and also protecting the borders. And we've had very good experiences with Great Britain, with the United States, with France, with even Saudi Arabia. All these countries have invested in our security forces. So if we get those two and we stabilize ourselves, then economic stability or economic growth in the country is feasible.
Moving on, you also, while you were in Paris, you had a series of one-on-one discussions, including one with Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. Can you briefly discuss the outcomes, especially in view of increasing focus or actions by the United States on Hezbollah, recurring threats of an Israeli war, and then the apparent controversy in Paris over UN Resolution 1559, and even recent calls by Lebanon's foreign minister to boycott, for an economic boycott of the United States? I mean, how are we going to deal with these kinds of contradictions?
I'm sure the United States is very scared of us now.
Absolutely.
It's a symbol. The problem is with the decision of the United States taking Jerusalem as a capital for Israel is a serious problem for the whole Arab world, the Islamic world, the whole world. And I don't think there are other than the United States and Israel who have reacted positively on this decision. And I believe that the world has reacted in the right way, because it's breaking international law to start with, by this declaration. We believe that the two-state solution is the only solution for the conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And we believe that Jerusalem should be the capital of Palestine. But we are really concerned. This is something that, this decision is purely giving a present to the extremists in the world to try to, thrive on this kind of decision. And I believe this is an undoable, the decision that was made by the United States is not a wise decision, and it will not, change that the conflict will end. I believe that the conflict, the Palestinians are there to stay. They won't go anywhere. They will not leave. So if the world and if the United States wants to be serious about this issue, they have to seriously look at, solving the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And I believe that this is something doable. Unfortunately, we believe that also Netanyahu is not somebody who wants peace in the region, because all he did along his tenure has destroyed the Oslo Agreement or any agreement with the Palestinians. I believe that we should, all of us, refuse this decision made by the United States, and I'm sure that hopefully we'll get somewhere. The decision of the Lebanese government is definitely to refuse the decision of the United States, and we will not change. I don't think anybody is willing to change their decision. There was another question also.
It was mainly about, were there any discussions in view of actions by the United States on Hezbollah and on threats of an Israeli war?
I think on this issue is the position of the United States vis-à-vis Hezbollah is clear, and I think also the European Union and a lot of countries are very clear about Hezbollah. But I also believe that all are calling for a national dialogue to start working on this issue among the Lebanese, and I think we should consider it seriously, this dialogue. I also believe that the issue of Hezbollah is bigger than Lebanon. It's a regional issue. I think this regional issue is not only the problem of Lebanon, but also the problem of the international community. So if one wants to be serious on these issues, do not blame Lebanon on the issue of Hezbollah, but blame the region on these conflicts. And I think a pure discussion or discussions that should happen in the region are the only way to solve these issues.
Turning to the Gulf, Lebanon-GCC relations recently took a hit in 2017. So what brought this about, and how do you see these relations unfolding in 2018?
Look, I cannot but understand the position of the Gulf. As a Prime Minister, as Saad Hariri, and I think no one in the right mind would not understand it. I think there is a conflict in some political parties that we have in Lebanon that are acting on their own interest in the Gulf. And I believe that this association policy that we put on the table in the Council of Ministers is supposed to release that tension that we have between us and the Gulf. I believe that people want to see the results of this association policy, and they will see the results of this association policy, and we will prove them wrong. I think the Gulf needs to understand also that we are friends. We want this relationship. Leaving Lebanon hanging like this is only going to serve others. And I believe that a true relationship between us and the Gulf and an openness will only strengthen our institutions in Lebanon, will strengthen the LAF, will strengthen the ISF, will strengthen the economy, will strengthen all the institutions that we have. And real investment in Lebanon will only strengthen all institutions and weaken all political parties. If we have electricity, and if we have a strong army, and if we have all the services that we should have for citizens of Lebanon, then no political party is going to be strong. If we have a very, if we do our job like we're supposed to do as a government, I think all political parties, including future movement, including all political parties, will be weakened. And then the agenda will be, the benefits of the Lebanese people. So we look forward. I think in 2018 things will clear up much better with the Gulf states. I'll be going there also, and we will have some, discussions in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE, in all these countries. Hopefully very soon. مش حبقى. You can try.
Many saw a gas oil link in your first trips after leaving Saudi Arabia. You went to France, from France to Egypt to Cyprus. How entangled is this industry's future with Lebanese politics?
The gas?
The gas and oil industry.
No, I think we have it on the Council of Ministers this Thursday, tomorrow, and I think it will pass with no problem. I think we'll have some discussions in the Council of Ministers. It's going to be a clear-cut discussion, and I believe that Total has a good offer, and we will finally, after 5 years of discussions on this issue, this government will be able to sign off the first, gas and oil exploration.
But for example, Lebanon and Israel are in disagreement over the demarcation of their respective maritime economic zone. This is something the U.S. has been trying to mediate.
Yes, we're working with the United States on this issue, and I think I believe that we have gone through positive steps, but these discussions are ongoing, and I believe that we can come to a closure on this issue. We need to just finalize certain meetings, and I believe that hopefully this government can finalize this problem.
Be able to start using and exploring these areas.
I think so.
Okay. How would you envisage Lebanese-Syrian relations if Bashar al-Assad stays in power?
Non-existent. I'm not going to change my mind on this issue.
Okay. So
هاي بقيت البحصة
بقيت هيدي البحصة. طيب.
Look, we have to understand that the world has to understand that we have 1.5 million refugees, and we believe in their safe return and the voluntary return of these refugees. I believe that the United Nations has to do, now that there is some kind of safety and security in certain zones, I believe that if the United Nations starts involving itself in those stable zones, or what do they call them now? De-escalation zones. If they become a fact that these zones are secure, that these zones are going to be safe, then with the help of the United Nations, with the help of maybe Russia or the United States or whoever, these refugees should go back to Syria. I believe also that in the past we've had part of our government, like Amn al-Am, who has, for security reasons, going and coming for the safety of Lebanon. I think this is the only maximum relationship that we can foresee.
Okay. The problem with the de-escalation zones, of course, is that until now they're not really workable.
Yeah.
In a place like Eastern Ghouta, the siege continues. There's still barrel bombs, and that's the safety of these zones, I think. Maybe, are there specific measures, or will you rely mainly on the UN to ensure that if people go back, that their move is both voluntary and safe at the same time?
I think with the United Nations approval, I think this is what we need. We're not going to take any steps towards, But anybody that wants to go back to Syria is free to go back. We're not holding anybody. And at the same time, you asked me earlier on a question about conflict with Israel. And I think the world has to understand also that any conflict with Israel, instigated by Israel, will have an effect of 1.5 million refugees. And these guys escaped to war. And they will not stay in Lebanon. They will not go to Syria, but they will go somewhere else. And the international community needs to understand that these people, if they leave, they will not leave to Arab countries, they will leave to Europe. And we have done everything possible for them to not to stay, but at the same time we're doing everything that we can as a country. But if a conflict is opened on Lebanon, where do you think these people are going to go? Who's going to suffer?
Yes, I mean, obviously there's a real need for a political rather than a military approach to the conflict in Syria, which is what we're seeing today, that the escalation is much more military. Let me ask you about the reconstruction process of Syria. I mean, the EU has stipulated that its financial support to Syria's reconstruction would only take place after a political transition. Federica Mogherini emphasized this very recently in Rome. You previously discussed in Moscow the Lebanese role in the reconstruction of Syria. What are the political implications, and how do you see Lebanon's involvement in the reconstruction process in view of the EU's position?
I think EU or us or any country that wants to really start a reconstruction effort in Syria has to understand that there will be an end to the conflict, political end to this conflict. I believe that when we talked about, us, Lebanon, being involved in the reconstruction of Syria, is we were saying that we should start building the infrastructure in Lebanon. So companies that would like to go into Syria and do the reconstruction can use the Lebanese expertise after the conflict, ends. We never said that we want to go to Syria while the conflict is ongoing and while there is no, final solution in Syria. I believe that the European Union position is the right position. I think it will only put pressure on the regime and all countries to, find a political solution, because in the end, these people have to, the Syrian people have to go back home. And we have to understand that any political process also on Syria has to include a solution for the refugees, because you cannot have a political solution in Syria without, bringing back about between 5 to 7 million refugees that are lurking around the world and they have no place to go. We need to make sure that the political solution is the return of the refugees is part of the political solution in Syria.
Absolutely, it's something I think many are calling for in that sense. Let me move to the final, perhaps, question, and then we can open it up for a small Q&A with the audience. Moving to local politics. There's much speculation about the shape of political alliances that are coming up in the elections. And many are thinking of the 2005 alliances, the quartet, as a strategic favorite, perhaps with the addition of one more. So what are the alliances you're aspiring to in the upcoming elections, and how do you see this unfolding?
It's a very good question. And seriously, I don't have an answer today for you. But I am open to we will have alliances with the different political parties. We have allies. I have allies that I would like to hold on to. We have also, this understanding or this alliance that we have now with the president also has proved that it was good for the stability of the country. So we have to look for the interest of our political party to start with, and I think we will act accordingly. What's important for future movement is to make an alliances to have the bigger bloc. This is elections. I might not like somebody, but if this makes me win in a certain, there are certain political parties that we cannot ally ourselves with, because our differences are tremendous. But at the same time, we're going to be open to alliances that serve the interests of our political bloc.
Thank you. I think we'll open it up to a few questions from the audience. And I'm going to ask you, please, to both introduce yourselves, but to also be very brief with a clear question rather than long statements, if possible. There's a lady over there, the mics, please.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you.
And I have a very brief question.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Fabia Midman. I am from World Forum. I have come all the way from Europe for this event, and I am very happy to hear you. Knowing Saudi Arabia, and probably you know personally Prince Salman of Saudi Arabia, do you foresee that in his eager to remake Saudi Arabia, to reinvent Saudi Arabia as a new nation, there will be an opening for Saudi Arabia to recognize Israel, and by this recognition also ask the Israelis to back from the Jerusalem issue and solve the problem so we can have a neutral Lebanon, a better Middle East? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Would you like to take one? Okay.
Sure. Go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. خدهم. One question.
Okay. First of all, I don't speak for Saudi Arabia, so we understand that. But I believe Saudi Arabia is, yes, reinventing itself. I think there is a lot of steps that are taking place in moderation and openness in Saudi Arabia, and I believe people can see that. On the issue of Jerusalem, I think the Saudi position has been very clear by the declaration of the foreign ministers in the Arab League. I believe also the Saudi government also is very clear on the issue of Jerusalem. I believe also that the only way to move forward on this conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis is the Arab initiative towards a two-state solution for Israel and Palestine. I believe that also that this conflict has to take some serious steps towards an ending. So the Arabs should be, ready for that, their initiative to start the real discussions. But I don't believe that with the decision that was made on Jerusalem, that only made things worse, didn't advance things. So I don't think that anybody is willing to take the step towards Israel.
Thank you. Take one here.
We'll take 2-3 if you want. Take 2-3 questions.
2-3 questions. Okay.
Yusuf Hussein. I think the dissociation policy leads to one place, to make it really have legs to walk on, which is neutrality, which is formal neutrality of this country. Obviously, dissociation is the first step. Do you foresee a roadmap towards formal neutrality of Lebanon, or is that beyond our expectations at this point? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take another question like this. I'll answer 2-3 questions. ما فينا نقول لك لا
نايف.
ما تصعبيهم.
لا بس
ما تقلل الدوز.
في des formations professionnelles ما فيني بلاها. What happened since you announced that you will reveal everything that bothering you, saying رح بق البحثة 2 days ago, and this morning we had this tweet from our dear friend Marcel Ghanim saying you cancelled or you postponed the program. And here one more, why we have the impression that yesterday allies are becoming today's enemies, and yesterday enemies are becoming today's allies. What happened?
Okay. On the بق البحثة how do you say it in English?
Throw the pebble out.
Spilling the beans. On spilling the beans. What happened is I was having a discussion with a group of young Beirutis in the house. And I said specifically that one day I will have an interview with Marcel. I didn't decide the day. I said one day I will have an interview with Marcel and I will spill the beans. This is what I meant. I didn't decide, this Thursday but the thing is now every person is a news outlet. So with all these live Facebook, Instagram and all of this became that Saad is going to have an interview. On the issue of yesterday's alliances are today's, I don't believe this. My job today is to unite the Lebanese, and I think the biggest challenge that I have is that during this crisis, all of the Lebanese came around, wanted me to come back, and this is a great responsibility. And I should not, I'm not a person who wants to make enemies. I want to unite an agenda that is in the interest of Lebanon, not in the interest of Saad. I believe that the media here has been expanding on these issues of conflicts between me and certain allies. I believe that this is not my policy. I believe that we should have clear discussions on how to move forward for the country, not for Saad, but for the country. And this whole story of allies being, enemies is not. It's absolutely not true. On the issue of disassociation and neutrality, I believe, like you said, this is the first step. And I believe that we need to make sure that these steps are, well abided by all political parties. The neutrality of Lebanon is also something, it's a policy that if we want to have it, but we can never be neutral to a conflict with Israel. We should be neutral maybe, or, enforce more disassociation in the future, to have a neutrality maybe in the Arab conflicts between certain countries. And I believe that Lebanon has acted on this issue quite well. When it came to the regional conflict, yes, we need to work more. I believe that is still too early to venture into something like this. But I think most Lebanese would like to see Lebanon as a country that is not involving itself in conflicts that has nothing to do with Lebanon. But we'll work on it. Nothing is impossible, by the way.
أنا اسمي منصور عبد الله، سفير متقاعد من 4 أشهر. نسمع كثيرا عن ملفات الفساد. متى تصبح العدالة اللبنانية قادرة على البت بهذه الملفات بسرعة وبعدالة وعدم تركها لوسائل الإعلام؟
Thank you. Look, we all know that Lebanon is suffering from corruption, and I believe that this corruption is due to our, lack of decision for 3 years in electing a president. I think the previous government has tried everything to limit any kind of corruption, but when you don't have the head of the pyramid, and when you have a government that is dysfunctional, when you have a parliament that was not able to meet, to convene, and to pass laws, when you have institutions that were, didn't have their head of pyramids, especially the supervisory institution, to fight this corruption, this is something that is going to be not an easy task for this government. But I believe that a big part of fighting corruption, we should move to an e-government, because this will cut corruption in a tremendous way. We should not let the citizens of Lebanon or the Lebanese go from one ministry to another to get their, to get their paperwork done. I think you start with the e-government. We've also we've filled up all the vacancies in the supervisory positions. And at the same time, just a month and a half ago, we did in the Ministry of Justice, we did this whole tashkilat qada'i, so appointments in the Justice Department. And I think It's a start, it's not enough. We need to do a lot of work on this issue, but we should fight it with all our means. And I think you will see very soon some cases that will come out, and we will be working, all of us together. And I believe that all political parties, all of them, should be hands off when it comes to corruption. If we need to prosecute somebody, whoever he is, he is with, or any political parties, all political parties should have hands off on this issue. You're the boss.
Nizar Abdul Qadir. Sir, I would like to go back to local politics, and especially the upcoming election. How confident are you representing a major line of politics that the outcome of these elections will really preserve at least the actual balance within the parliament? Because some analysis I have read, and I've talked to many experts on the matter, they expect probably the axis of the resistance to come in the upcoming election with at least 71 members. This is going really to disturb the balance, and probably this majority could really make new laws to bring some changes, major changes, or deep changes to the Lebanese system. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have another question.
There's a gentleman here, and then we'll move back there.
Your Excellency, Muhammad Alamuddin. The dissociation policy is the cornerstone of your government's policy nowadays, which is a one-way policy from Lebanon towards its regional neighbors. What about reciprocity? Have you had any assurances, for example, that regional powers such as Iran will not intervene in local politics through its allies, whether local or foreign, such as the case of Khazali lately?
Thank you. One more question, like this.
There's a lady in the back there, and then we'll move to the other side again. Just to give women a voice.
Sure.
Thank you. My name is Huda Al-Khatib Shalak. I'm a lawyer. I will speak in Arabic. في ظل الصعوبات بلبنان وبالمنطقة يلي عم نشوفه انه عم نحاول نلملم ونسد الثغرات الموجودة، ولكن نحن قادمين على انتخابات والوضع دقيق جدا. هل هالانتخابات يعني يعتقد بانه حترجع تحسن الوضع او انها حترجع تعكس الحالة المشرذمة اللي نحن موجودين فيها؟ وعلى صعيد المجتمع المدني، هل الحكومة لديها استراتيجية لنقل المجتمع المدني والناخب بالنهاية المواطن من حالة الديمقراطية التوافقية إلى عملية ديمقراطية حقيقية، أم أن هذا حلم بعيد المنال؟ شكرا.
First of all, on the question of the parliament, I think if you go back in 2009, the same when we passed the law of 1960, the same people said the same thing about the results of the parliament, and yet we were able to win the elections, and we won it by a good majority. I believe the parliament in the future is going to be the same outcome. You will have a balance. I think you will have also Walid Bek, who's going to play the Waidat al-Arbain like he always does. I believe all these discussions about there's 8th of March, let's say, winning this election is only people who are scared of the law, of the election law, or they want to delay the elections. I don't believe that there will be one majority in the country. all the alliances today within this government, actually you see that it's not about 8th and 14th. The problem that we have today, there are certain people who are still fixated in their old trenches and do not want to move forward. This new alliance between us and the president has nothing to do with 8th and 14th, but this is an alliance for the interests of the country. And we have showed it so many times on different matters when it came to the interests of the country. And I believe that putting, both of us, all political parties in trying to differentiate between 8th and 14th again, or go through this division that we had in the past, is only going to make the country not move forward. Because for 12 years before electing President Aoun, we've had 8th and 14th, صح ولا لا? But what did we do? We had a horizontal and vertical division in the country, and nothing moved. No economic file moved, no political file moved. We had some achievement for the 14th. We had the tribunal, we had, things that were important for us and for the country. But when it comes to the economy, when it comes to the interests of the people, when it comes to moving forward the country, when it comes to ending this kind of division, when it comes to lessening the tensions between Sunnis and Shia, we have to understand that we do not live in a cocoon. We live in a region that is boiling and exploding, and we see the conflict in Iraq, we see the conflict in Syria, and it could have easily come to Lebanon. Our responsibility as political leaders is to make sure that this fire does not touch Lebanon. And yes, sometimes we have to make compromises, and we all make compromises. But I don't believe that the outcome of this election is going to tilt towards a majority to this part. I remember in 2009, everybody was convinced, and this was in the peak of the conflict between 8th and 14th, that 8th of March is going to win the elections, and they will have 71 or 75 members in parliament, and that would be it. And the outcome was totally opposite. And I believe this time it's going to be the same. The law is difficult, and the law is not the usual law that we're used to. But I believe that you will have much more, civil society come into this parliament, and civil society, knowing them and knowing their goals, are not going to be either with us or against us. And I believe they have their own agenda. They have and I believe that their agenda also can make us work harder, because they're going to push us to enhance ourselves politically. Did I answer all the questions? Yeah, sure, I can take more.
Okay, there are a couple of questions on that side.
Yeah.
And then over there.
Gilbert Domit. If we open a Carlton Ritz in Beirut, who do you think should be in it?
But we have a Phoenicia.
You're all stuck here.
But I have another question. How can we...
You think you're getting out of here?
So are you saying that some of the people in the room should be in a Ritz-Carlton? My question is, how can you guarantee the dissociation policy not using Lebanon as a proxy for regional war, when we know that Hezbollah, the Future Movement, and other political parties are historically, confessionally, financially, politically, in the case of Hezbollah, militarily, sponsored by these regional powers that are in high opponency, high conflict. How can you guarantee something like this within the context of the actual ties that political parties on both camps have with regional powers?
I'm glad you asked this question, because as I said before, the problem should not be Lebanon's problem. It's a regional conflict, and the regional conflict, the regional players are the ones who are supposed to pay the price. We always want to blame Lebanon because Lebanon is the weakest link in the chain. And yes, maybe Hezbollah is in Lebanon, but at the same time, the main problems, the conflicts that we have in the region are regional players. It's like Syria. The problem in Syria, everybody is involved in Syria. So do you blame one side or you blame all sides? And why did we end this conflict from the beginning? Because the international community didn't move forward as it should be. And I think, blaming Lebanon on all these decisions and just let me give you a small example. How many conflicts did we have against Israel under the pretext that Israel wants to get rid of Hezbollah? Did it end? Was Israel successful in ending Hezbollah? Or did it only make sure that Hezbollah became stronger? The solution is dialogue. The solution is a political solution. The solution is not Lebanese solution, but also regional solution. You can blame me as much as you want as a country, but you know very well there are so many millions of Lebanese here in Lebanon and around the world. They don't want this conflict. They don't want to be involved. Do you take a policy to alienate those people that are against any conflict? Or do you go for the main problem that is causing all of this? My response to you is, let us stop hiding behind our finger. Let us see things how they are, and let us solve these issues like they should be solved. There is a regional conflict in the region. This regional conflict, the international community understands it, knows it, but they don't have the guts to take positions on these issues. Don't blame Lebanon, blame the international community. One more question.
One more question. Your choice.
Yalla, you decide. Oh, my choice? هون في شاب هون. Here?
There's a mic, please, over there.
In the middle. خير الأمور أوسطها. مش الصعب ولا السؤال؟ يلا أجاك من ورا.
First of all, Mr. Prime Minister, we're happy to have you back in Lebanon.
Thank you.
If we talk about facts, we have to accept facts. The fact is the Syrian Republic is still led by President Bashar al-Assad, which is a government still recognized at the United Nations. Whether we like it or not, this is a fact. Lebanon has an embassy in Damascus, and the Syrian Arab Republic has an embassy in Beirut. The point is to deal with the refugee crisis. You said that you refuse a contact with the Syrian government. But if it is in the Lebanese interest, isn't it more responsible to deal with the Syrian government? Because we know the United Nations can deal with such issues, but it's more of a crisis management. It's not a solution. If it is in the Lebanese interest, isn't it worth it to deal even with the devil?
I'm glad you asked this question, because is Lebanon the only one who has refugees? We're not the only one. Iraq has, and they have good relationship with the regime. Jordan has, Turkey has, Egypt has. They all have, and they all have relationship with the regime. صح? Did any refugee go back from these countries? No. It's not about the relationship with the regime. It's about the safety of these people need to go on their, they need to go back for sure. But it's not, if opening to the regime would take them back, I don't think this is the solution. Because all these countries that I named, they have relationship with the regime. Why didn't they go back? Do we ask this question? Ask yourself this question. Why aren't there refugees in Jordan that are almost the same amount of Lebanon, maybe less, why didn't they go back? In Iraq, that is suffering a conflict, why didn't they go back? In Turkey, in Egypt, that has, many economic problems. They do have certain security relationships between them. Why didn't they go back? Because there is a problem of the refugees going back to Syria for their safety, for also, we need to understand, I don't think the regime wants them to be back. That's why it has to be the refugee issue is an extremely important issue for Lebanon. And we're the ones who are suffering the most. And I totally agree with the notion that we need to, the Syrian refugees need to go back. We need to implement Lebanese law here. We need to stop this, this kind of not implementing Lebanese law because we feel bad. I think the international community also needs to be responsible, on their commitments. And I believe if everybody does their job well and right, the refugees can go back. And I think the problem that we have today is, and I don't, some people say that the Lebanese talk about the return of the refugees is outrageous. But I want to ask a question. How do you think, people who are in Europe, or politicians in Europe, and in the United States, they say much worse than we say. And they say, we don't want, and you've seen it all on TV. What we're trying to say is we cannot be in the policy of refoulement, because I'll tell you from now, the moment we do that, the international community will have a very violent, not violent, but they will have a very bad reaction towards Lebanon. We need the international community, but the international community needs to understand that Lebanon cannot sustain this kind of pressure, and they need to help us. That's why when I want to do a conference in Paris and encouraging people to help Lebanon, it's for the sake of Lebanon for sure, but it's also a public service for the whole international community. And we need to work on pushing this policy of return of the refugees to Syria. And one other thing that we need to understand is the Syrians, they have a country. We need to differentiate. Let us not mix things. They're not the Palestinians. They're the Syrians. They have a country, they have land, and they have passports, and they have papers, and they can go back anytime to Syria once the conflict is done. But to compare them also to the Palestinian issue, that's the big problem. I believe that talking to the regime is only going to benefit the regime in the talk, but the regime will not do anything towards returning the refugees. I think the right venue on this issue is to talk the countries who are friends with the regime and to stop this conflict. I think this conflict is coming hopefully to an end. We see stability now a little bit. I believe there is the Geneva discussions that are happening, and there are the Astana discussions. I believe an understanding between the Americans and Russians and the players in the region is extremely, especially the Europeans also, to have an understanding on ending this conflict, and it has to happen. It has to happen fast. I believe that these countries that I named, I think they need to push their egos a little bit and work on solving the issues of Syria, full stop. It's not about who has more influence. It's about 25 million people that are suffering day and night, and this conflict has to end. Thank you so much, everybody.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much. It's been an honor to have you.